So here we have a Mamiyaflex camera. This is a C2 Professional from 1958 to be exact, and it has a couple of problems. The slow speeds are struggling to run down. It is struggling very much to run down. This is supposed to be 1 second. Okay, and the other thing is that the aperture control is very hard, almost impossible to move. So to fix these problems, we need to take the shutter off and take it apart. Now, I know that you can find videos on the internet where people are suggesting that you should douse the shutter blades with lighter fluid and carefully wipe off the oil, but I wouldn't advocate that approach. It might work for a while, but not in the long run, because the cause of the problem might not even be the shutter blades. The blade operating ring could have oil on it as well. Okay, let's take off the front panel to start with. I unlock it here and then remove it like so. Okay, so now let's pause for a moment and think about what steps we need to take. As you can see, this shutter is synchronized for flash. Here is the flash sync terminal, and the wire goes from here to inside the shutter where it is soldered to a sync contact switch. Now we've got two options available to us. I can either go from here, take this bit off, or to go inside the shutter and unsolder the wire. I personally prefer to take this little platform off with the flash terminal. And in order to do that, I need to remove the viewing lens. And I'm going to use my spanner wrench tool to unscrew this retaining ring here. And once I did that, I need to unscrew these two screws. Then this piece here will come off. Okay, so let's do that. The flash contact is now freed up, and you can see the wire that goes inside the shutter. And there's also this metal plate that goes underneath. I think it might have to do with the ground connection, but I'm not sure. So the next step would be to separate the shutter from the front plate by taking out this retaining ring here. So this is the back of the shutter, and I found this broken screw here. I think it is the same as these three here. Well, now just one more thing. There is this washer or spacer here. We can now turn the shutter around and take out the front lens group. Like so. Now it is probably a good idea to remove this pointer so that it doesn't get in the way when we want to remove the shutter selector ring. There is just this little screw that holds it there. And once we've done that, see that tiny little screw? That needs to be taken out so that this ring, this retaining ring, can be unscrewed. I'll do that next, and see, I've got the shutter set to 1 second just for reference. And in the first place, I'm going to just remove the inside ring here, and then we'll see what we will find underneath. Now I have the internals of the shutter partially exposed. When you put back this retaining ring, just make sure that the flat surface is facing up. There is a ridge on the other side. At this stage I can still cock the shutter and fire it. This should be 1 second. The shutter speed selector ring is still there. This plate here is the speed cam. It is rather like a computer. As you turn it, it computes the shutter speeds. Just notice how, when I cock the shutter, this pin moves towards the middle, and when I release the shutter, it travels from the lens flange to the outside rim of the shutter. See? I will explain why that is significant. Just under here, we've got the speed escapement, and the shutter speed is determined by two factors. One is how far this pin travels when the shutter is released, and also how close this other pin is to the middle of the shutter housing. So for 1 second, this pin has to travel quite a long distance, and this pin is very close to the middle, meaning that the gears in the gear train of the speed escapement down there are all engaged. And that creates a rather slow shutter speed. Now, if I go to a higher shutter speed, like this is 1/4 of a second, then this pin is not going to have to travel very far. And thus we have a faster shutter speed. If I go to this setting here, which is 1/15 of a second, you see that the pin has to travel quite a long distance. So you'd think that 1/15 of a second will actually take longer than 1/4 of a second. But of course it doesn't. And the reason being is that now this pin is further away from the middle of the shutter, and that means that fewer of the gears are engaged. When you put it back, just notice this little notch there. That should match up with this protrusion here. Okay, so that's off. Now just very carefully I remove the speed cam. And here we see the shutter in all its complexity. Marvelous. Let me jump back for a moment because I forgot to show the bulb setting, which is like that. And to tell when this pin is right here in the corner, then we have the B or bulb setting. So let's try. There you go. By the way, this is Mamiya's implementation of the Synchro Compur MX shutter, or at least one of their implementations. Now, a bit of terminology. This is the main lever. This tension type spring is the mainspring, which is like the engine of the shutter. And here we have the speed escapement we talked about earlier. This empty space here is where the self-timer delay mechanism normally sits. But this shutter doesn't have a self-timer. Now I'm going to try to operate the shutter and see how it works. Obviously this will be now the longest time, 1 second or maybe even longer. Oh, and it hasn't finished running down. Maybe I'm just blocking it with these tweezers. Right, these cogs should line up like that. I think it's okay now. So let's try again. Gosh. Right. Okay. I've said before that this shutter is synchronized with flash, and the synchro contacts are here. This wire is soldered to a copper plate down there. And the sync delay escapement is this one here. Currently it is set to X sync, which means that this delay mechanism is disengaged. So when I fire the shutter, watch how this switch closes when the shutter blades reach their fully open position. There you go, like that. However, when I switch to the M setting, then this delay mechanism gets engaged. Now it is free to move. And when I release the shutter, what is going to happen is that even before the shutter blades open, this switch closes the circuit. You'll also see the delay escapement starting to run down. And when the blades are fully open, the sync contacts close again, but that's going to be very quick. So now, can you see that? How the delay mechanism starts to run down? And then for a moment, I don't know if you could see how this closed up again when the shutter blades were fully open. So now the delay mechanism is running down, the contacts are closed, and then they momentarily open and close again when the shutter blades are fully open. So X sync is always on, and the sync delay mechanism is only on when we set the sync delay to M. Okay, I hope that made sense. What I'm going to do next is to remove the main lever. First, disengage the main spring. Yep, done. And then I take this out very carefully. Right. And the next thing will be to remove the speed escapement and clean it. And to remove it, there are two screws to take out. This is one of them, and the other one is sitting down there. Okay, I will be back soon. Before I remove the speed escapement, otherwise known as the retard gear train, I thought I'll try to show how the shutter cocking and release cycle actually works. Earlier I pointed out that the timing of the shutter is determined by two factors, one being just how far this pin is from the lens flange. In the first position that you see here, when it is closest to the lens flange, all the gears inside here are engaged, and thus the resistance is the greatest, resulting in the slowest shutter speeds. In the second position, which is like that, see this star wheel here, and there is a pellet which is under this cover. Well, they are going to get disengaged. Good for the somewhat faster shutter speeds. And in the third position, which is like that, even the gears in the middle here are going to be removed from the linkage. So the escapement can operate with the least resistance, hence the fastest shutter speeds. When we cock the shutter, the main lever will rotate this cogwheel counterclockwise, and this tab here will push the cam under it into the same direction. Now I'm going to remove this cogwheel now, so we can see what is underneath. Here we have a coil spring which is under some tension already, but when we cock the shutter, it's going to be under even more tension, and make the main drive cam rotate backwards when the shutter is released. I will now take this spring out as well. It looks like this. And now I will be able to operate this thing manually at a slow pace, step by step. I just need to put this back into position. Okay. Now I'm going to simulate the cocking of the shutter. When the shutter is being cocked, this cam, I think it's called the main drive cam, is going to rotate in the counterclockwise direction, like that. It pushes this lever out of the way, like that, and when the shutter is fully cocked, the cam gets arrested by this lever here. It prevents the cam from rotating backwards. Now let's see what happens when we release the shutter. When the shutter release button is pressed, then the main lever is going to turn counterclockwise. And this pin, this downward projecting pin, pushes this lever aside, the other end of which now moves away and no longer blocks the drive cam. It begins to spin back towards its resting position. Rotate backwards. It pushes the blade ring lever to open the shutter blades. See that? And now it's going to close the flash sync contact. Like that. Actually, this pin should have moved here when the shutter was cocked. So now the escapement starts to run down, as you can hopefully see, and once it ran down, with a little help, then the shutter blades close as this bit here turns the blade ring underneath. Like so. Now there's also a spring here, which is normally, it sits like that. It is responsible for keeping the shutter blades closed, but I took it off in order to move things easier in this little demonstration. I hope it made sense. I'm going to take a short detour because although I mentioned the B or bulb setting, I didn't show what happens when B is selected. As a matter of fact, I just noticed something now that led me to understand how it works. Right now, the shutter blades are in the open position. This tab pulls the shutter blades closed unless this bulb stop lever prevents it from doing so when the shutter release lever is held down. Even in that case, the stop lever can be swung out of the way by pressing on its opposite end. The question arises, what part would do that? The speed cam, of course. Remember the location of this pin? Now here, when I press the shutter release lever, the other hook-like end of the bulb stop lever is free to move in and catch the shutter closing tab, whereas in other shutter speed settings it is moved out of the way by the shape of the speed cam. I've been repeatedly saying that I will remove the speeds escapement for cleaning, but now I decided against it. I will clean it in position instead. The reason being is that I don't want to accidentally mess up the timing. With some shutters, and this might be one of those, the fine adjustment is made by setting the upper end of the escapement ever so slightly closer or further away from the lens flange. The lower end acts as a pivot, and the screw hole for this upper screw is somewhat larger than the screw itself, so it can be fastened in slightly different positions. The result is that it takes more or less time for the cam to push this lever aside. This is a fine adjustment though, and not that easy to get it right. What I'm going to do now is to remove the mechanism plate from the shutter housing. I'm just looking at these bits and pieces if I need to remove any of them first. I guess I can take the drive cam out before it falls out and gets lost. Also, the outer and inner release levers. This lever has a spring attached which sits tightly against the inner wall of the shutter housing. I think the rest can stay. I see some other springs which push against the shutter housing, and they could very well cause some headache during reassembly, but let's hope for the best. Now, turning the shutter around with its back facing up, I'll remove the aperture control ring. I note this pin which couples the ring to the aperture assembly. These screws are very short. Now the flash sink setting ring can be lifted out. There's just a spring inside that tries to hold onto it. There. These screws are next. One of them has already fallen out. And now comes the interesting part. The shutter blades will get dislodged, but I've already taken a photo of their arrangement. Wow, the shutter blades actually stayed in place. Well, that also means that they've got oil on them and that keeps them stuck together. The shutter blades shouldn't have any oil on them. They should be bone dry. I will clean each of them individually. As far as the speed escapement is concerned, I'll pour lighter fluid over it and exercise the works and blow out the lighter fluid, hoping that it will take with it any unwanted particles entrapped among the gears. It is important to note that when the retard train is still wet with lighter fluid, it typically works beautifully, but that can be deceptive. The real test comes when it is completely dry, maybe even only on the next day. I just noticed that the blade's operating ring doesn't rotate as freely as it should, so that needs to be cleaned as well. Unfortunately, to get to it, the lens flange has to be taken out. It is held by these screws. I want to show some photos I took. I ended up removing the speed escapement unit. It is not of the kind I was talking about earlier. It is set in place without any possibility of a movement, so there is no room for fine speed adjustment and therefore no risk of messing up the factory setting. On this picture, the purple arrow points to the end of a spring. It can jump out of its place easily. So if the speed escapement doesn't work as it should, then check this spring to see if it is still in place. On this picture, you can see the two pellets pointed to by the arrows. Both are engaged between the speeds of 1 second and 1/8 of a second. Only the one with the green arrow for 1/15th of a second to 1/60th of a second, and for higher speeds, neither are engaged. The only one spinning is the cogwheel on the right. I think this close-up picture is a handy reference. You can see the star wheel and pellet of the sync delay escapement near the tip of the tweezers. And finally, this picture shows some of the components removed. By the way, when I disassemble something as intricate as a leaf shutter, I put everything into a container like this in the exact order I took them off. The order is important, it saves you a lot of headaches. Initially, it might seem straightforward and easy to remember how things fit together, but all too soon you find yourself in a situation when nothing is certain anymore. I removed the lens flange to clean the blade's operating ring, and now I am reinstalling it. If you've also removed the sync delay mechanism, like I did, Make sure the pellet faces the right direction before you screw the lens flange back, otherwise it means doing it again. And yes, I'm talking from experience. Best to put the star wheel back too, and then the pellet's orientation becomes obvious. The other thing to watch out for is that the leaf operating ring rotates freely and it is not pinched by the lens flange. I've already removed the old paint with acetone and I might secure the screws with nail polish later. Any suggestions what color to use? This is an all-important question. Let's speed up the boring parts. I'm terribly clumsy with these screws sometimes, not to mention when they pop out of the tweezers and roll off the desk and I'm down on my knees trying to find them. A magnet comes handy in that case, provided the screws are made of steel. Just checking that the shutter blade's operating ring still moves freely. I'm going to have to remove the aperture blades and clean them. The diaphragm is really hard to close and open. While we are here, this is the flash sink contact the wire is soldered to. These are the pivots of the aperture blades. It will be quite a challenge to put them back into position when reassembling. These screws are the same size. Pook, off it comes. So, here they are all stuck together. These blades are rather large, aren't they? Now, this plate is oily too. Some of these blades are not perfectly flat. This could also cause them to move less smoothly due to an increased friction. After cleaning comes the reassembly. It is hard to give advice on how to go about it. Everyone will develop their own technique, I guess. Initially, it can be quite nerve-wracking, but with practice, it becomes easier and quicker. I am using a rubber cone to grab the cover plate with and carefully place it onto the blades. And finally, nicely put together. Now come the shutter blades. Interestingly, they have a small additional bit at their roots where the holes are. Even more interesting is that four of them have it on one side, but there is this one which has it on the opposite side, and this will be the last one to put on. I chose to set the blade's operating ring to the open position, and I start here where these springs are. reassembly is in the clockwise direction. Ah, this is so much fun. Pretty good. The shutter blades are now back in place and they open and close nicely. Here I am putting back the spring that keeps them closed. Like that. Nice and springy. I have now fully reassembled the shutter. Let's test it. 1 second. One-fourth of a second. All good. The diaphragm is much better now too. I reinstalled the shutter I repaired onto this camera and I'm happy to say that it is working beautifully. I thought that in closing I will say a few words about these Seikosha S shutters. They are quite common. They were used on the Mamiyaflex C2 cameras as well as the later model Mamiya C3 and C33 cameras. Although by the time the C33 came out, Mamiya also released the new series of black lenses like this 65mm lens here on this Mamiya C330 professional f camera, which has a new Seiko shutter. The silver Seiko S shutters were fitted with lenses of various focal lengths. For instance, this Mamiyaflex has the 80mm standard lens on it, and the C3 and C33 cameras are currently fitted with 105mm lenses. I also have a 65mm lens here with the same silver Seiko S shutter. I might add though that having worked on 3 of these shutters already, I did notice some minor differences internally. So if your Seiko S shutter doesn't look exactly the same as the one in this video, don't be surprised. However, the differences are indeed minor, so if you know how to repair a Seiko S shutter, you know how to repair all of them. It is also true that if these shutters were used quite heavily in the past, and remember these are professional cameras, then they might be worn beyond repair. In one of my shutters, I just couldn't get the slow speeds to work reliably. The speed escapement kept getting stuck at a certain point, even after taking it apart and cleaning it thoroughly. I think this is about all I wanted to say. I hope that this video was useful in one way or another. And if you decide to embark on a project similar to mine, then I wish you good luck. Bye.